A very good morning once again, and I'm glad you're still with us here on Morning at NTV. If you're just joining us on the show, welcome on board. You're watching the premier morning show in the land. The hashtag on Twitter is Morning at NTV. You can be part of the conversation as always. The policymakers and those that make matters, or rather decide matters in the country, are watching, and your views could be the ones that could shape opinion thereafter. Now, we are going to look at something that is very pertinent. It's only 9 days to the election in Kenya. And in the words, like I said earlier, of the Austrian Chancellor, Clemens von Bismarck, when Kenya sneezes, we might as well catch a cold, especially economically. But of course, the politics of the day define the economics. We are hoping the political events leading up to the election and, of course, the election itself on the 9th of August won't degenerate into anything that could affect us negatively. Here to give us a little bit of perspective on that is Captain Francis Babu. And, of course, there is a lot that you can always be sure to learn when it comes to Captain Francis Babu. He's a seasoned politician, a veteran, well, a businessman, and right now, as we speak, the nation is ailing. People are aching. I would like to ask you, Captain Francis Babu, as I welcome you on the show, the nation looks to be at a point where we can't even figure out what is going to happen tomorrow. We do not know. Those who are supposed to tell us what could happen or how we could get there seem not to have anything to share to that particular effect, and we've been told we are on our own. How are people coping with those ones you've interacted with?
Well, first and foremost, thank you very much for having me here this morning. Welcome. And you are bringing a very interesting topic. In fact, I think all our media, the media fraternity, should come out on this thing of what was in the Monitor and Vision last Friday, that there is something called multidimensional poverty.
Multidimensional poverty, yeah.
And index, and it's an interesting one because they talk about not only food, they talk about health, they talk about education, they talk about employment, and it said that the people in Uganda who are below that, about 18 million. Now, 18 million out of 40 is nearly half.
Out of 40 is nearly half the population.
That means that really our effort, all our effort, should be put in that direction, especially with the story of Karamoja, which is going on, which is a very unfortunate thing. And I think all our hands should be on deck, and we should not only gloss over these things. We should become a little bit more serious and really talk. The Ugandans are looking at, in fact, if we are saying when a Muslim is praying, he faces Mecca. We are facing Karamoja right now. Our people in Karamoja are not having it well, and the explanations are not sufficient.
Not forthcoming.
And they are forthcoming, but they are not sufficient. And nobody is telling us whether there is a change. So that is one. Now, from there, you can virtually come back to us until 2 days ago when we got a little bit of rain. But will that change the food which got destroyed during the season? So these are questions. Then there is the point of bringing food from there to our cities. The people in the villages might get a few scraps here and there, but how about us who are staying in cities and towns? And you have to bring the transportation is exorbitant, and it's become extremely expensive. It
translates into the high prices that we see.
So we really, Ugandans should now be talking, how do we survive in this situation? And good things about what is, you have a short-term plan, the medium and
then the long term.
Sometimes our leaders talk about the long-term plan,
too much,
which is good. It's not bad at all.
It's not bad.
Then they talk about the medium. But right now, what do we need? Where do we get? How do we intervene? For example, on transportation. Transportation is fuel. How do Uganda government get off their mighty high horse and get the fuel to a reasonable price so that we can get food into towns so that our people can feed?
You speak about that, and there's often a school of thought that has been propped that subsidies don't work, or even when they do, the effects are really harsh, and it's not somewhere we want Ugandans to go. Can't something be done about that?
There's two sides to that story. When you have a dishonest population and you put in a subsidy, it's the middlemen who get the subsidies.
Okay.
And even the poor farmers do not get them. Even the consumer, the end product, does not get them. So the question is, how do you manage subsidies? We are not saying they should subsidize the food or the transport. Can we find a way to look at fuel? One of the countries in East Africa subsidized fuel. They're already having problems with it. I mean, the problem is actually the inflation went up.
Yeah.
And I think it's more than that. You need, for example, the other day, I was very happy when I saw the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia coming to visit us. As we talk right now, I know very well, it's public knowledge, that they are supplying fuel to India and China at 30% less, which brings it from 110 to about $80 a barrel. And that therefore brings the fuel at a reasonable price. The question is, can our country be able to convince Russia to give us? We are very small. Can
we also survive the kite feather effect? Because when fuel prices go up, it's really quick. Coming down. No, the fuel is going. The oil price is going up because even the people producing oil have now also reduced pumping, and therefore the price has gone up, and they want to maintain that because they want money themselves. That's right. The question is, if Russia is willing to give us that fuel, and some of the other Middle East countries that we work with. But what has happened here, we have totally liberalized fuel. Your government doesn't import. The marketers and dealers. No, it is the main groups that import fuel here. And that's why we're still getting it. Very expensive, but it's here. Some countries, they don't have fuel at all. So it is up to you to decide as a manager. And by the short term, government must have certain amounts of money to help. For example, there's no way you can say you're not intervening in Karamoja. You're not. Yeah. Whether you took subsidies or whatever it is, you must take fuel there, food there. Number two, we need fuel to ameliorate the problems of the local population. It is all in a short term. We're not talking about a long-term plan. That's right. In the short term, could they do something about this? We are talking, and we are not interested. I hear people talking about Soroti, they are talking about Mao. Look, those are very good things to talk about. They are good conversation for after tea. No doubt. Because your stomach is full. When your stomach is not full, those things don't matter. Right now, Ugandans' stomachs are not full. Yeah, no. I enjoyed listening to the Secretary of the Treasury. He says, you see, we have the people in Uganda hungry. The hungry man doesn't sleep. The poor man doesn't sleep at night. That's right. The one who's got the food doesn't sleep because the hungry man is not asleep. So all of us are not sleeping. The question is, how can we in the short term mitigate these problems? You've been in some echelons or corridors of power before, and perhaps you could have come face to face with how some of these policy rollouts are conducted. For example, at the time of Minister Dr. Ezra Suruma and his predecessors, how were matters conducted? Oh, our growth at that time was over 6%. We were doing very well in terms of the economy. Things were coming up. We were not having problems with weather and so on and so forth. So really comparing the two is not comparable. Okay. But now, we've had a bigger problem. We had COVID the other day. Everything went to a standstill. Then suddenly COVID got reduced and suddenly everything went up. When we went back to the numbers of the economy, our inflation was at 3.45. Now we need a growth which is over 6% or 7% to be able to get the money going. Now, when COVID happened, a lot of things happened. Some businesses closed, some problem. Now the taxation is also not very good. The fuel is the only problem, one of the very few things where taxes is got by government. Now government has to run. It has to. Now that brings us to administrative costs. Can we reduce do we have the moral and political authority to be able to say, wait a minute, this is our country. Our administrative costs are high. Let's reduce the administrative cost so that we can get money and we can therefore intervene in certain areas. When we get better, we can think about reviewing the whole administrative cost. Okay, the ability to come up with short-term solutions to many of the problems that Ugandans are afflicted with seems to be a very difficult one for the government. However, the very government is quick to come up with funds and resources to fund political campaigns and ensure that whatever political result is wanted is actually achieved. That speaks of the fact that aspects like by-elections are conducted in the way they are. It's a conversation, you said, we shouldn't really delve into, but many times the politics of the day defines what the socio-economic aspects are, and inevitably we're going to have to look at it. Do you see the conduct of elections as something that should be...
The amount of money they spend in those elections is a drop in the ocean. What we need is much more than that to be able to overcome this problem.
That sounds dismissive.
No, it's very small. It's very small. Yes, it's happening. It's not good. It's happening. But when you're hungry, even 1 shilling going across your nose, it makes a difference. The problem, when you're hungry and you're pushed in a corner, whatever little amount, like 40 million here from members of parliament, a little bit in Soroti being spent, looks like a huge... But we want to look at the amount of money required to bring the Karamojongo out of this problem. How much money? By the way, we've even got people to give us some money from outside to try and give them food. Yeah. And the World Food Program.
The World Food Program is on board.
And a few other people have come in. I know even some countries have come in. We're very grateful to that, but it's not even enough. Now, yes, I agree. There's some mismanagement in terms of expenditure, but not because of those politics. There's some mismanagement within government.
Inherent.
Yeah, that's right. There's some things we're spending money on which we shouldn't. I told you earlier on. How many advisors do we have in State House? How many members of parliaments do we have?
Another would give the reason you've just peddled. For example, advisors are very small.
They are not.
A drop in the ocean.
They are not. They are not. There are many. There are many. There are over 100. Now, that one is a one-time off. That thing of the election.
The election.
1 month, 2 months. This thing is continuous.
Continuous.
Yes. The members of parliament is continuous, and then they take some time to pay them. So that means that we are having problems. So we've got to go back on the drawing board. I might be wrong, by the way. Don't take me for perspective.
No, I'm not saying you.
I'm just looking for ways and means how we can mitigate these problems in terms of money.
All right, you will come on the show today on the fact that the country could be grappling with finding some truth and accepting that they are. Some people choose to, well, wear a bit of dark glasses in the way they look at some things. Today, the Daily Monitor is celebrating 30 years, and there are commemorative events that have been laid out. Today's newspaper has very interesting stories, including the very first edition in 1992. This was on July 31st, 1992. Let me just hand this to you so you can have a look at it and give us your views on what you make of this very landmark celebration, and of course the fact that the newspaper continues to survive despite...
I think you're as old as Monitor, but I was there when they opened it. It was here on Winton.
I am older than Monitor. Let's set the facts right.
It was started here at Winton Road. I know the people who started it. They were very nice people. I supported them. I support all the people who come out with new innovations.
That's right.
They came from another newspaper and then they came to this one. Oh, they were very, very fresh, some of them from the university. Some of the things they used to write were very interesting. So they were there to change until change started changing them. But you see...
You don't say.
Oh, well, you know that most of you young people, you like to change everything, then suddenly change begins to change you so that you can conform. Anyway, this is a very nice newspaper, and I like it.
Try to open, there's a story in there that could be interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I need you to give us your perspective on it very briefly so that we can transition into the Kenya elections and how they will affect Uganda matters, and the fact that we've had what could be a story that needs to be retold, the story of Uganda matters. Just next page.
Yeah, it is.
Next page.
Yeah, I need this one also.
You need that one also? All right.
The story of the Uganda matters needs judicial inquiry.
That's interesting.
Historical. No, I don't think judicial. You need people to really find out what it was all about. In fact, good historians.
Fact-finding.
Yeah, good historians who can do research. The problem is, who is writing the history? Who wrote the history then? And who is going to do the investigation?
Yeah.
The people who wrote this history, who were they? And there is something which is very, very important. Forgetting about what is written here.
Yeah.
Bunyoro never signed an agreement with the British until 1932. They resisted. Buganda signed in 1900. and a lot of confusion, kings on, kings off the throne, and they were being pushed left, right, and center. Eventually, the king who was there went and joined his friend in Bunyoro. They ran away. They went somewhere in Langwan and Acholi. Those people hid them, but these guys were more powerful, and they caught them.
That was Mwanga and Kabalega.
Kabalega and Mwanga.
Yeah.
Now, looking at them from that point of view, why were they fighting against the colonialists? One could start inferring that actually did not want these people to take over their country.
That's right.
And they wanted them to be friends, but they didn't want them to take over their country. But then there were other forces. In fact, during that time, we had the religious wars. Yeah, we had tribal wars. And worst of all, the British were so few. So what they did, they took other tribes to fight other tribes within the country. Yeah. So divide and rule. So the question would be, the people investigating, if they have a good starting point, yes, they do. I don't want to conclude this and that. That's right. But from the religious point of view, there was something else that came out. Was it factual? Yes, these people were religious. Was the king overzealous to kill these people because he thought they were terrorists? I don't think those people were terrorists. Therefore, they could not be people who wanted to overthrow him. So, but this is what happens in palace politics. There are people who talk in the ears of the big men. Even here we have it. Yeah. They go to the president, they say this, another one says this on this ear, and they sort of create a very unfortunate circumstance. And you know, people who are in leadership, if you say something that sort of tickles them a bit, they think you have said the truth. And this is very unfortunate. And can you say that again? There are people whose job is to go to the president and even to some other leaders. They come up with a story about somebody else. And then at the end of it, they say, Mr. President, I didn't have transport to bring me here. What took him there was transport, but he destroys other people. He destroys other people. And unfortunately, the president gets to know that it might not be true. Then he investigates it. It takes him, it takes the resources away from the real work to investigate if this guy is anti-government. Now, these are the kind of things that are happening in African countries, and they are very, very unfortunate. People are not open, they are not straightforward, they lie, and for the reason, very simple reason, he just doesn't like your face and goes and destroys you. And that can cause a lot of problem for you and your family, and it has done in a lot of African countries. And they found out later that they made a mistake, but usually people are so shy to say, come out and say, I'm sorry. Mistakes were made. And then they lose good leaders. We have some very, very good leaders. This country is gifted. We have a beautiful country. We have beautiful people. And sometimes they destroy some of our very good leaders out of selfishness, out of greed.
Well, that is very, very interesting details on exactly what the commemorative events for the Daily Monitor. Of course, we shall be sharing as time goes on. Before I took you to the story of the matters, you had something that was very interesting you needed to touch. No. Okay. You go ahead. All right. I don't want, this is a very big paper. Okay, it's a very big paper. There's a lot that can be looked at. Let's transition from Uganda and, of course, stay with elections. Yes. Speaking elections here in Uganda has become a bit of touch the wrong nerve perhaps, but elections in Kenya have the potential to affect a lot that goes on here. Just like I said earlier, what could happen, or well, if it thankfully or hopefully it doesn't happen, then everything will be okay.
The Kenyans,
what do you see Kenya right now? We just had 2 weeks ago, not 2 weeks, but just over a week, where a cooperation agreement, I'm afraid we're going to have to delve into that story, a cooperation agreement between 2 of the leading politicians in the country is done, but it causes a furore. But the very Ugandans spoke of mature leadership in Kenya when President Uhuru Kenyatta shook the hands of Raila Odinga to create the kind of momentum that has helped Raila Odinga be literally the front runner for this particular poll.
You're actually even catching it up. He first shook hands with Ruto.
With Ruto.
When he first won the elections.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, he went in. What has been happening in Kenya, which is actually what multi-parties do in most countries, is multi-parties having cooperation agreements during elections, and therefore forming governments. This is happening in Israel, it's happening in Italy, where they have reached in elections, no one party can get a majority rule.
That's
so they
right.
normally have to work with other parties.
With other parties, yeah.
And so they have coalitions and they form government. This happened in Israel. The other day they had a lot of problems for over 2 years. Small parties did not want to join the big ones.
Want to join the big ones.
Now here, in Kenya, it has become norm. It actually started during Mzee Moi. A lot of this, you know, you have Kenya's Asili, Kenya
Kwanza, and
you have Kano. So all these have been taking sides. But what is interesting, they take different sides every time.
Yeah.
You find out one goes this side, another one goes that side. Now that has become the norm in Kenya. Unfortunately, there is one psychological thing I keep telling people, and they don't look at it. Wherever there is competition in Africa, we do not take the effects of it very seriously. We find ourselves doing it. For example, when there is competition, there is tendency to hate your opponent. There's a tendency to use long language. There's a tendency to use money. There's a tendency to do propaganda. There's a tendency to, if you like, smear. Now, we seem to copy this from the Western world, but they do it differently. And our media is also not helping. Media also takes sides. Basically, I think during competition, we've got to resist from the things that we say and do. And it's all to the political players, by the way. It's not one-sided. People pretend to be angels, that we're the ones who are being oppressed. But if you hear the kind of rhetoric that comes from all sides, it's not very good. And recently it has gone a little bit gaga because I think one of the candidates seems, although an underdog, he seems to be doing very well. Now the other two who had the handshake, they seem to have realized the guy is going. And then they started a very interesting method of trying to destroy him. Now, when you do that, he gets sympathy. So we've got to learn that during elections, we've got to wait for people to speak the truth, not to destroy people. If you want to destroy somebody, it should not be during the elections. Do it during the normal time. But you wait until the election, then you begin to destroy somebody. When yourself, you're living in a glass house. A lot of people who destroy others are not very neat. I've seen it in Uganda here. There are people who pretend to be angels, but it's the kind of things they do is very unfortunate. But that comes during elections. That comes during elections. Because of competition. That's right. People get excited about this.
All right. Thank you, Captain Francis Babu. We're going to take a short break, but when we return, the conversation continues here on our Kickstarter on Morning at NTV. Do stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're glad you're still with us. On Twitter, the hashtag is morning at NTV. You can be part of the discussion. You can also follow at Chris Higenyi so that we can make sure the conversation is cordial, especially after the show. We can do a lot of catching up. When we went into the break, we were speaking about a lot with Captain Francis Babu. Today's discussion has not been as structured on the politics of the day as many of us would have loved to, but it's pertinent that when discussions come up, the issues of the day should be dealt with as fluidly as possible. And of course, joining us on set is Mr. Maxon Muhwezi, a youth leader within the governing National Resistance Movement, and I am told by some insiders, a budding frontrunner for some of the positions ahead of 2026. What do you say about that?
We thank God. Good morning, viewers. Good morning, Africa. I'm once again happy to have the opportunity to be hosted here on Morning at NTV for intellectual cross-pollination. Wow. Yeah.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
And no doubt today you are under the favor of God. Captain Francis Babu is a seasoned politician, experienced at his...
I'm still learning.
You're still learning a lot, and there's a lot you can always pick from. But allow me pick your brains on the nature of politics today. It's a conversation that is very tricky. The by-elections in Soroti unearthed a lot of tensions, and within the National Resistance Movement, there is more what appears to be a feeling like we must take it, okay? at whatever cost. Reports of violence, reports of ballot stuffing are rampant, but when they continue to happen, as a youth leader within the party, these are not stories that augur well for the next generation. It's things you must be looking at and saying, can we conduct an election? Even when we have the advantage, we are going to win it. Why should we employ everything that we have in our arsenal, even when we can win?
Thank you so much. Chris, when the paradigm democracy was introduced in the 3rd and around 4th centuries there, so many states, societies adopted it. The developmental states, the predatory states, the developing states. And for the case of Uganda here, we adopted it even when it was parochial and segregative, but also picky. That some people were not allowed to participate in choosing leaders when at the time of this paradigm. Now, the age, the children, the women, PWDs, all those were not allowed. That's the historical narrative of paradigm of democracy. Here in Uganda and across the world, it has evolved to suit different societies, but also countries, in terms of choosing who should lead. Because that is the biggest question of society, who should lead? The knowledgeable, the strong, the weak, a philosopher, who should lead? It is one of the greatest questions of the time. So democracy came to answer this. And here in Uganda, it has been simplified to mean the real meaning of democracy, in my opinion, as an individual. Demo meaning people, and kratos meaning rule, people's rule. That means you're going to the question of numbers. It means if you have people in democracy, you win.
You win.
If you don't win.
Okay, that brings me exactly to the point I was trying to make. If the numbers are at your advantage, and you could actually win even without the amount of force applied, is there, what justifies the force? Isn't it something the youth leaders within the party should be able to look at and perhaps tell the leaders to pay attention to?
Yeah, of course, force, reasonable or unnecessary force is not important in any election, not just here in Uganda or even in a by-election. As long as you have numbers, as long as you have structures, and people believe in you. For me, in terms of young leaders, Chris, I want us to really see campaigns of message, campaigns of issues, campaign of cruciality, campaign of what actually affects the population. You get, that should be the gist of any campaign across the world. Not force, not fighting, not what. But you see, even people react, or forces react to action, to how people act. For instance, I've been seeing people make communications of army, security, and all that. You know very well that we are surrounded by serious and fragile situations of security. You know that. Therefore, in any society that has got issues of numbers and violence and things to do that, people will always infiltrate that and take it as an advantage, to either cause harm or cause insecurity or otherwise. And also, maybe to add on,
very quickly,
there is no law that says whenever there is an election, security shouldn't be around for purposes of law and order or even peace. Not at all. There is no law that stops security from hovering over a situation that is associated with violence or even control of law and order.
Okay, allow me ask Captain Francis Babu to give us perspective on how young politicians can take on the mantle, especially not necessarily of top leadership positions, but defining the narrative of change politics. During your time at the helm, when you were in Parliament, before we came back for the second segment of the show, you spoke about the fact that the likes of Norbert Mao, the late Jacob Olanya, were budding young Turks at the time you were at the helm of politics. What were they leading in terms of strategy, the things you looked at and saw they were doing well? And it is something that the likes of Maxwell Muhwezi and any other within the opposition political parties can replicate.
Thank you. I think you should always look at our history, where we've started from, where we are. When the British came here formed the Protectorate in 1894, they didn't come with multi-parties, they ruled us from London. Now, for 70 years, we didn't do anything about the so-called democracy we're talking about. We were under our kings, and we had a system that actually worked for the local people.
That's right.
I told you a few years, around 1900, we had a little bit of problem between 1895 onwards, between two kings who did not want the colonialists to take over. That took up a little time. The colonialists used tribes, divide and rule. They brought in religion. There was a big war, and therefore our politics was never straight. We were still under. They ruled us under the kings. They called it indirect rules. And in 1950, we started our first political parties. One was UNC, the other one was DP. Now these were formed on very parochial levels. One was a religious one, or the other one, and both of them came up with something called unitary, meaning they were going to fight the local government
establishment.
Now, in 1961, starting from 1958, 59, 61, they brought something called Electoral. They tried to bring these parties in. Again, we did not know what we were doing, but the real elections took place in 1961. They were boycotted by some groups. In 1962, they had elections, and you know what happened? Well, after the elections, the two eldest people were Sir Edward Mutesa and Obote. The rest were all under the age of 30 at independence. All our ministers. Now, that tells you the youth had started in 1960. The elders did not complain then. The youth were the ones
they complain now.
No, it is the youth who are complaining now. I'm coming. And this went on. The people who took over power and who fought to change these things were all youth. Right? In 1971, the soldiers who fought were youth. In 1980, they were youth. So when you talk about the youth in politics, they have been a very strong group of people in politics. So 1980, we started this thing. Unfortunately, it went under the table because of bad political management. And in 1986, we now get this new group. It came with the youth. So it recognized.
It recognized the power.
Now, you're asking me about leadership drive. How do we get leaders?
How do we get them?
I think that's a very good question. Do we get leaders by just waiting until they turn up like a market? Or do we go out and start following each one of these young people and seeing in each group who have got good leaders? Now, the kings used to do that. To get a leader to become a leader in the king's palace, they followed the family. Want to know where he comes from, what he does. In fact, the king in Uganda never stayed in the palace, stayed with the local people. He fetched water, he lived like other people. Now, it's a very serious thing. To look for leaders, you don't just put on a suit and turn out and say you're a leader. We've got to know where you're coming from, what you are, what your habits are, how far you've gone. Now, the university was, if you like, a place where we could pick up some students and see, this one has been a leader. And we thought those who had been leaders at Makerere were there for good leaders. That was the time when we had only one university. Now we have more than one university, so they have a lot of leadership drive. The question is, those people who stand for election in the university, are they the best, or the best ones keep quiet? They don't come out. So we've got to follow them. The parties, the so-called parties, I call them so-called because ours don't behave like parties. They behave like something else. Now, if they went out there, they would be the one to look for the good leaders to bring them to stand for elections. So the parties, their job is to get us good leaders. Now, if a party brings somebody who's totally educated, goes to some place where they forge certificates and give it to him, and the party pushes him, you begin to realize there's something wrong with that party. We need to get leaders a leadership drive of good leaders, and we have good. And a few minutes ago, you talked about Mao, the former Speaker of the Parliament, now the Chief Justice, a few other people. There are several. They came to Parliament, some of them very young. In fact, Mao was very, very young.
Okay, allow me ask Mr.
Now, let me, this group,
yes,
the NRM, did something the others had never done.
Okay.
They came out with the Youth League, they came out with Women League, they came out with PIDA, they came out with the minority leagues so that they could bring them in politics. Another way of a drive to bring leadership in. Unfortunately, people have abused them. The people who go into those things, they are looking for something else. They are not looking for leaders.
Interesting there. I'll ask you, within the national resistance movement, he spoke about the Youth League, the Women's League. I would love to concentrate very finally on the Youth League and how it is structured to ensure that there is an opportunity, for example, for you to advise, to also impose your thinking, not necessarily by way of
imposition.
Well, to be able to let it be known in a way that ensures you are heard. Because there is one thing to take it forward, but to be heard. Are you being heard as the youth leaders within the national resistance movement?
Yeah.
Be honest.
Yeah, of course. You see, like my senior here said that the NRM is cosmopolitan. You have got the Youth League, you have the Women's League, the PWDs, the veterans, the workers. Now, all of these structures have got small units from top to bottom. You have at cell, you have at the village, you have at the parish, at the sub-county, at the district, and at the national level. These mobilize young people politically, but also for the party. They organize the structures for purposes of production, for purposes of responding to society prerequisites. Now here, it is not about just participation. It is also about decision making. We have seen a number of times, for instance, the topmost organ of the party, SEC, the Central Executive Committee. Wherever you sit, I think you have seen our representative there, the Youth League, the chairperson of the Youth League. So at any level of the NRM, the young people are included, but also they participate politically and also in the decision making. But the point I want to make is, can we have as many as possible? Because the last time we had these structures, the Youth League, and way back, 2015, that is a long time.
Okay.
The people have gone, others have vacated, others have gone out of the country, maybe others are beyond the age. So there is need to reorganize and have these fresh structures. We have new young people, like you're saying, like for instance, from institutions to the structures.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Maxon Muhwezi. We are constrained for time, and this discussion began a long time ago. You joined us on the way, but this, of course, can always continue on any other day. On social media, it does continue. Many thanks for making time, Captain Francis Babu.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for the insight and perspective. Many thanks to you too, Maxon Muhwezi. I hope we can be able to engage at another opportunity. That has been it for the Kickstarter, a discussion that is as emphatically exhaustful as, of course, insightful in terms of what we do offer. We do hope you can be part of the conversation on a daily. Please take charge and your views will be heard. Like I said earlier, the hashtag is morning at NTV. We'll take a break. When we return, we shall be looking at how small and medium enterprises are making it despite the hard times, and just how you can also be able to run your small kaduka.